Welcome to Rambam in Depth. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam, Hilchos Shvisis Asar, Perek Aleph, Halacha Gimel. But first, in Halacha Aleph, the Rambam writes, Mitzvahs Aseh Lishbeis Mimalacha, Be'eser L'Chedesh HaShvi. There's a positive commandment to desist from work on the 10th day of the 7th month, which is Yom Kippur. Shenemar, as it says, Shabbos Shabbos Hulachem, it should be a day of Shabbos, a day of rest. So that's the mitzvah of resting on Yom Kippur. In Halacha Daled, he says, Mitzvah Saseh Acheres Yesh V'Yom Kippurim. There's another positive mitzvah on Yom Kippur. V'hi Lishbez B'Yim Achilu Shtiya. It's to rest, desist from, resting from eating and drinking. Shenemar, as it says, Tanu Eslav Shesechem, you shall afflict your souls. So what the Rambam over here is telling us, that the mitzvah of affliction, of not eating and the other afflictions, is based on the concept of shvisa, of resting. Just like we're supposed to rest from work, we're supposed to rest from eating and drinking. And the mocker of the Rambam is the Teres Kainim. Teres Kainim in Parshas Emor says that from the Posik Shabbos, Shabbosin that we see by Yom Kippur, we know that you're supposed to rest and desist from eating and drinking. Now, it could be the mocker of the Rambam is actually the Gemara in Yuma. Ayin Dalet Amid Beis, the Gemara says, how do we know that the affliction of Yom Kippur shouldn't mean that you shouldn't sit in the shade, you should sit in the sun, you should sit in where it's cold? Maybe that's what it means to afflict. So the Gemara says it's compared to Malacha. Just like Malacha is Shev al Taisa, don't do the work. Same people over here, don't eat and drink, don't do things that are the opposite of affliction. I saw in a sefer, Shalmi Simcha, from Simcha Elberg, Olav Shalom, who asked the question that according to this, it seems that there are two separate mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah to not eat because it says, Tanus Lapshesechem, you shall afflict your souls. And there's another mitzvah of Shvisa, of resting from eating. But, L'fi Yazdaiti, I think that the whole premise is faulty. It's not that the Torah is telling us there are two separate reasons why we're supposed to fast. One is ta'anus nafshesechem, you shall afflict, and the other one is you shall rest. But the Torah is trying to tell you what does it mean to rest on Yom Kippur. So one aspect of resting is not doing malacha, and another aspect of resting is desisting from eating and drinking. The reason why the Torah uses the terms ta'anus, shall afflict yourselves, because the Torah is trying to tell us what are the limits of this resting? Does it mean you have to sit in one place and not do anything? No, the resting means resting from eating and drinking, things that would be considered to be affliction. But it's not that the mitzvah of affliction is a separate mitzvah from the mitzvah of resting. It's really one mitzvah. And this will lead to many nafkaminas, many practical differences in halacha. Number one, there's a discussion about whether there's a mitzvah to have Simcha on Yom Kippur. Actually, there's a discussion about Rosh Hashanah as well. But some Shittas, the Re'im, one of the Rishonim, holds that there is no mitzvah of Simcha on Yom Kippur. And after he brings a mocker for Simcha and Rosh Hashanah, he says, V'yom Kippurim, Aval Pi Shehu B'chal HaMayadim, even though it's one of the festivals, Eina B'chal Simcha. Why? D'haksiv B'eben Nisim Es Nafshesechem. How could it be Simcha when it says you're supposed to afflict yourselves? This is the Yereim, and there are others also, and other sources from Azayir, that Yom Kippur is not a time of Simcha. But the Rambam clearly doesn't agree with that. How do we know that? Because in Hilchos Chanukah, of all places, Hilchos Chanukah, the Rambam writes that there's no Hallel on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Why is that? He says, because Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim einam yemei simcha yesera. There are not days of excessive simcha. So from there it's mashma that not just that that is a day of simcha, it's not just simcha yesera, it's a subdued kind of simcha, which doesn't warrant saying Hallel. So from here you see clearly that the Rambam holds that there is simcha Yom Kippur. And also from the Torah it's mashma like that. He brings from some of the Ge'anim who incorporate in the davening the words Mayadim l'simcha, Chagim l'zmanim l'sasein. And the Targum Yonasim ben Uzziel on the pasuk Shabbos Shabbosain, which is written in regard to Yom Kippur, he says V'avdin zimnin meyadechin b'chedva, that these are times of joy during the festival. And the Shiltas, one of the Ge'enim, writes, Kiban de Isbahu Simcha Kiregolim Dami. Since there's Simcha because it's one of the festivals, it interrupts for Avelis, for mourning. So the Rambam and the Yereim disagree whether the Simcha Yom Kippur, and it hinges on this very question: what is the Geder? What is the character of the Mitzvah of affliction on Yom Kippur? Is it a Mitzvah of affliction? That's the goal, that's the objective. Or is it based on Shavisa? It's an extension of the prohibition of not doing work on Yom Kippur. You're not supposed to rest also from eating and drinking for things that cause inui. And if that's the case, we can understand how it cannot be a contradiction to Simcha. If you say the whole Geder is inui, is affliction, how could you reconcile affliction and Simcha? They're incongruous. They're incompatible. But if you say that, no, the Torah is not telling you that the Torah wants you to afflict yourself, it wants you to be in pain, it wants you to rest from Ichilu Shtiyah. But how is that described? It's described by the words of inui. That's one nafkamina lahalacha, and we see the Rambam goes l'shitase. Another nafkamina lahalacha, when the Torah tells you you have to do things in a certain way, there's the mitzvah, there's the basic chiyuv, and there's also the fnimishurus adin. You can be mahader, you can do a mitzvah with more beauty and more excellence and be more stringent. If the mitzvah of fasting in Yom Kippur is basically inui, affliction, then it would make sense that if you afflict yourself, add to the affliction, that would enhance the mitzvah. You're not obligated, but if you do it and it doesn't get in the way of other obligations, obviously, then you're mahader the mitzvah. But if the geder of the mitzvah is not inui, is not affliction, that only describes what you're supposed to rest from, why would you want to add to the affliction? There's no point. It's like resting on Tuesday, keeping Shabbos on Tuesday. It's not a hidur. There's no such thing as Tuesday. Tuesday has nothing to do with Shabbos. Same thing, the added affliction has nothing to do with Yom Kippur. That's not what Yom Kippur is about. It's about resting. That may be another nafkaminul halacha. A third nafkaminul halacha is, are you allowed to do things before Yom Kippur in order to make the fasting and Yom Kippur more likely, more easily? Are you allowed to try to reduce the difficulty and the pain in fasting? So there's a machlekes of achreinim about it, but it would hinge on the above. If we say that the whole point of Yom Kippur is inui, is affliction, then there's room to say that you're not supposed to do anything to remove that affliction, or at least, as Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, it's a novel b'shus HaTorah. You're allowed to do it, but it's not consistent with the spirit of the law. The Torah wants you to afflict yourself, and you're doing everything to avoid the affliction. But from many places, it's mashma that there's no problem, because the Gemara says that when you eat on Erev Yom Kippur, it's as if you fasted 2 days. Why? Because eating Yom Kippur makes it possible, it makes it easier for you to fast. So you see, the Torah doesn't care that you made it easier to fast. Why couldn't you do other things, other techniques to make the fast easier? But that would be consistent with the shita of the Rambam. If you say that the mitzvah of Yom Kippur is basically a mitzvah of shvisa, of resting, and the Torah just tells you to rest from achilah b'shtiyah, what's wrong if you make it easier? As long as you're resting, that's the main thing. Who cares how easily it was for you to rest? It doesn't make it many difference. So these are certain nafkaminis lahalacha, if you follow the Rambam's approach, that it's a mitzvah of shvisa, of resting. And many other questions can be resolved with this premise.